It was always a case of when, not if, and on the 28th of February, Covid-19 reached New Zealand.
The Ministry of Health has tonight confirmed New Zealand has its first case of coronavirus.
4 days later came the second case.
The second case of Covid-19 is confirmed in a New Zealand citizen. This is a woman in her 30s, recently returned to Auckland from northern Italy.
By the 7th of March, New Zealand had 5 confirmed cases. Life remained much the same, except we were starting to see the first run on toilet paper. Here's Craig Irwin from market research company IRI.
Toilet paper, water, even dietary supplements. And some of those categories are up 20, even 50%. This, at the moment, is the 5th biggest week of the year, and the only other weeks that beat it are the 4 weeks around Christmas.
Then, on Friday the 13th of March, events began being postponed.
This morning, the plug was pulled on this weekend's Pacifica Festival due to host tens of thousands of people. And the Corona Piha Pro Surf event, featuring world champion Kelly Slater, has been postponed indefinitely. Concerts further along the calendar, including My Chemical Romance and Deftones, have also been postponed.
The following day, the first anniversary event for the Christchurch mosque attack was cancelled, and Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern brought in some of the strictest border rules in the world.
As of midnight Sunday, every person entering New Zealand, including returning New Zealand citizens and residents, will be required to enter self-isolation for 14 days. Everybody. The Pacific are exempted from this measure. They are the only ones. Anyone from this country, though, will be required to automatically self-isolate should they exhibit any Covid-19 symptoms upon arrival in New Zealand.
This was March 14th, and at this point, 8 people had Covid-19 in New Zealand. The next move on Monday the 16th of March was a ban on gatherings and events of more than 1,000 people. RNZ's Deputy Political Editor Craig McCulloch explained what that meant.
All major events, indoors and outdoors, this applies to festivals, fairs, sporting events. The Prime Minister talked about religious and cultural events as well.
While the virus had only been in New Zealand a few weeks, the economic impact had been felt for a while. And on Tuesday, the 17th of March, the government announced a huge economic stimulus package.
The government has today administered the economy an unprecedented $12.1 billion shot to help those hit hard by the COVID-19 epidemic. In what it calls the largest peacetime economic plan in New Zealand's modern history, the package is more than all of this government's new operating spending across 3 budgets combined.
It's included wage subsidies of $5.1 billion, $125 million for a self-isolation support fund and $500 million for health. That day, the 17th of March, the number of confirmed cases here in New Zealand was 11. This was the day a group of people gathered at Matamata's Redoubt Bar to celebrate St Patrick's Day, and later became one of the country's biggest COVID-19 clusters. The following day, the number of confirmed cases jumped by 9 to 20. At this point, all were linked to overseas travel or confirmed cases. On Thursday, the 19th of March, things ramped up again. First, Health Minister David Clark announced tighter restrictions on gatherings.
Today I can confirm we are extending that advice to indoor events of 100 people or more.
Later that day, the Prime Minister, amid reports of tourists flouting the 14-day self-isolation rules, made an unprecedented move.
From 11:59 p.m. tonight, we will close our border to any non-residents and citizens attempting to travel here. This will stop tourists or temporary visa holders, including students or temporary workers, from coming to and entering into New Zealand. New Zealand citizens and permanent residents will be able to return. And of course that includes the children and partners of citizens and permanent residents. These changes will also apply to the Pacific.
Then, on Saturday, the 21st of March, the Director General of Health, Ashley Bloomfield, confirmed they'd been unable to trace where 2 people caught the virus, and Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern made an unprecedented lunchtime public address from the Beehive to the nation.
There are 4 levels to the alert system. At each level, there are things we need you to do to keep you safe, and there are things the government will do too. Alert level 1 is where COVID-19 is here but contained. In this phase, we prepare. The basics like border measures, contact tracing, and cancelling mass gatherings are all activated. You'll see that this is where we have been when COVID first arrived in New Zealand. Alert level 2 is where the disease is contained, but the risks are growing because we have more cases. This is when we move to reduce our contact with one another. We increase our border measures and we cancel events. This is also the level where we ask people to work differently if they can and cancel unnecessary travel. Alert level 3 is where the disease is increasingly difficult to contain. This is where we restrict our contact by stepping things up again. We close public venues and ask non-essential businesses to close. And alert level 4. This is where we have sustained transmission. This is where we eliminate contact with each other altogether. We keep essential services going, but we ask everyone to stay at home until COVID-19 is back under control.
She introduced a 4-level alert system for COVID-19, with New Zealand placed at level 2. Almost immediately, a petition was launched to raise us to alert level 4, meaning a lockdown. And just 2 days later, on Monday the 23rd of March, the Prime Minister responded.
Effective immediately, we will move to alert level 3 nationwide. After 48 hours, the time required to ensure essential services are in place, we will move to level 4. These decisions will place the most significant restrictions on New Zealanders' movements in modern history. This is not a decision taken lightly.
There was immediate panic at the shops.
It is really insane. Quite a few people starting to lose their rag a wee bit, to be honest.
Oh, it's chaos, absolute chaos.
The day before we entered the 4-week lockdown, a state of emergency was declared. At about 6:30 p.m. on Wednesday the 25th of March, phones across the country buzzed with an emergency alert, reminding us all of the new rules. There was no countdown clock or event to mark this momentous occasion. The nation just quietly went into lockdown as we entered the 26th of March. As RNZ's Joe Moyer reported, on that first day, we did well.
The Police Commissioner says overall, New Zealanders have been very responsive to the call to stay home. And as far as he's aware, there were no major problems or arrests after the midnight deadline.
And thanks to Christchurch woman Deb Hoffman, we found new ways to entertain children.
You place a soft toy, a teddy bear, a rainbow, anything in front of your window that's visible from the street. And people can then look on their streets and see who's taking part.
Then, a month and a day after the first case here, and on the 3rd day of lockdown, the news no one wanted to hear.
Sadly, New Zealand has had its first death linked to COVID-19 on the West Coast early this morning.
By the 1st of April, there were 708 cases of COVID-19 in New Zealand. And as people stayed home in their bubbles and washed their hands, it didn't stop Health Minister David Clark breaking the rules. He was forced to apologise after he was spotted by a member of the public at a mountain biking track. 4 days later, he was in trouble again.
The Health Minister, David Clark, will keep his job for now after breaching the lockdown rules. But the Prime Minister says if it had been any other time, he would have been sacked. Dr Clark has admitted acting like an idiot, saying he let the team down after driving his family 20 kilometres to a beach for a walk on the first weekend of the lockdown. He'd already apologised for driving a few kilometres in his branded electric van to a mountain bike track in Dunedin.
In amongst all this, the Prime Minister found time to allay children's fears ahead of the Easter weekend.
You'll be pleased to know that we do consider both the Tooth Fairy and the Easter Bunny to be essential workers.
In the week leading up to Easter, there was cautious optimism as each day saw a lower number of new cases. But then, on Good Friday, an unexpected press conference.
My name's Caroline McElnay and I'm Director of Public Health at the Ministry of Health. The Ministry of Health is sad to report the country's second death linked to COVID-19.
It wasn't the only death over Easter weekend. By Tuesday the 14th of April, the death toll had climbed even further.
Today I'm very, very sad to report 4 additional deaths linked to COVID-19 infection. 1 of those was in Wellington and 3 are additional deaths from the Rosewood cluster in Christchurch. This brings the total number of deaths in New Zealand to 9.
But there was also a glimmer of hope. With less than a week left in the initial lockdown period, we learned what life might be like at level 3.
Level 3 is lockdown light. Kiwis are still asked to stay at home as much as possible, not to travel outside their region, and to limit their contact with others.
Today marks 50 days since the first case. Since then, there's been 1,409 cases, 816 recoveries, and 11 deaths. 50 days ago, few could have imagined where we are now. Those 50 days have seen our lives dramatically changed, and as the Prime Minister said, this is a marathon, not a sprint. Her message stays the same.
Stay at home. It will break the chain of transmission and it will save lives.
For Checkpoint, Lydia Batham.